I love the Fire Emblem series, so when I heard that Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia was announced for the Nintendo 3DS, I knew right away that I wanted to pick it up. I even tried to get my hands on the limited edition for like the hour that it existed, and if you were lucky enough to pick that up, good job, you win all the awards. Anyways, while I say that I'm a big Fire Emblem fan, I admit that I don't know a lot about the individual Fire Emblem games that came out in Japan before the series came to America in 2003. I knew that Echoes was a remake of Gaiden, a game that came out back in 1992, and really the only thing I knew about Gaiden was that it exists. It's a thing. I had no idea at the time that it was considered the black sheep of the series because it changed up so many things that are now considered Fire Emblem tradition. And I couldn't help but wonder if a remake of such an old and different game would even be any good. Because in all honesty, while some older games have nostalgic charm, and there are certainly those that can stand the test of time, most other older games can really feel outdated. Just ask my poor old copy of Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. I'm sorry, buddy. I tried. I really tried to complete you, but I failed. Thankfully, Fire Emblem Echoes is not like Shadow Dragon. Most of my concerns about this game turned out to not be an issue, and little did I expect for this game to quickly just become so endearing to me, and eventually become my second favorite Fire Emblem title after Path of Radiance. But to help explain my opinions and break things down a little bit more, I wanted to look specifically at the presentation, story, and gameplay of Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia. Fire Emblem Echoes looks pretty impressive for a 3DS game. As someone who is used to the honestly kinda clunky 3D models and bad voice acting of the GameCube and Wii titles...
Ah, you're up. About time!
I continue to be impressed with just how honestly impressive Fire Emblem gets with each subsequent release. This is also the first Fire Emblem to boast full voice acting, and they did a really good job with the English cast. Characters like May, Saber, and Berkut had plenty of personality to their voices that helped make them feel more real.
It's nothing important, it's just... Well, I was wondering, do you think girls should be all delicate and proper and junk?
Graphically, the game looks pretty good as well. While characters still have one static piece of portrait art while they speak, they continue Awakening's trend of having different facial animations to add a little bit more personality. Official art of the characters is also shown on the bottom screen while you're on the battlefield. Battle animations are fluid and fun to watch. The music is also some of my favorite from the series. While some of the original Gaiden music is a bit short and repetitive, it successfully made the switch to a more modern sound beautifully, and it always gets me pumped for battle. The story in this game starts out simple, but it gets the ball rolling. You are in control of Alm and Celica, two childhood friends who set out on different journeys to bring peace to the continent of Valentia, which is currently at war. It is a bit of a standard fantasy game story, which unfortunately means that I guessed a few of the plot twists before they were revealed. However, it doesn't mean the story is lackluster. In fact, this is honestly one of my favorite Fire Emblem stories, and that's because of what a great job the team did with the characters. Fire Emblem games have always been about the characters, as the developers want you to connect with every single unit so that you don't want to let them die. Support conversations are also back, which are optional short scenes that allow you to learn more about different characters as they continue to fight together on the battlefield. However, unlike the last couple of installments, most of the character development and interactions aren't contained in these scenes, but rather they just provide some fun banter on the battlefield. While some fans of the more recent Fire Emblem games might find this a little bit of a disappointment, I believe this is a good step, as it means most of the character development and interactions occur within the main storyline itself, which is honestly where it should be. The characters took this game and made it go from an average fantasy game to a pretty compelling narrative. The characters grew as people on their journey, which made them feel way more well-rounded, and it also made me care deeply for the characters in both Alm and Celica's groups, and I wanted to know what was going to happen next in both of their narratives. I also wanted to specifically mention Berkut, the nephew of Emperor Rudolph and next in line for the Regalian throne. He was a villain created specifically for this game, as he was never part of the original Gaiden, and I think they did a really good job with him. I actually thought he was just okay as the game started out, but as the story moved closer to the climax, he revealed himself to be a much more complex character, and might be my favorite in the entire game. Because most Fire Emblem games are guilty of having some honestly really one-dimensional villains, I hope having some more compelling ones becomes a new trend for the series. As for the actual gameplay, Echoes, like the rest of the Fire Emblem series, is a tactical RPG. The games are basically laid out on a giant grid, and there's a lot of strategy involved as to where you can position your units in order to attack and defend. You can kind of think of it as a giant game of chess. Traditionally, Fire Emblem games have a mode called permadeath, which means if a unit falls in battle, they're gone for good, and sometimes the game story is altered based on who is and who is not alive. This makes every move in the game all the more important. While the classic mode is a Fire Emblem staple and was part of the original Gaiden, Echoes also features casual mode, which was first introduced a few installments ago for those who find permadeath a little too intimidating. Casual mode allows fallen characters to return at the beginning of the next battle. It is a nice addition to newcomers who still want to try out the series, though you will still want to focus on having everyone survive the battle so you can collect the nice bonus experience awarded at the end of every battle. It is also of note that for most of the game, you will be controlling both Alm and Celica's armies, and after you get past the first 2 acts, you can control whichever one you want. This allows for some nice pacing, as if you finished a really interesting chapter in Alm's group and you want to keep pushing on, you can. But if you want to take a break and further Celica's narrative instead, you're welcome to do that too. While the general framework of gameplay looks the same, Fire Emblem Echoes does mix things up quite a bit. You can explore a lot more of the world in Echoes than you could in other games. You can look around towns, collect items, and talk to villagers. The dungeons also allow for moments for you to run around how you wish. Considering some Fire Emblem games are just literally battle grid map after battle grid map, this mixes things up nicely. They are also not as prominent in the game as I thought they would be, but rather they just help mix things up a little bit after you finish several classic battles. The dungeons only ever got a little bit frustrating towards the end of the game, as on Celica's Path in particular, there is a dungeon with no save spot past the first floor, and all of my units were fatigued, and I was afraid that I might die and have to restart the whole thing again, but thankfully I did not. I was okay, because I ate all of the oranges. Another difference is that your weapons don't break after a certain number of uses. Instead, using things like magic now costs the caster a small bit of their health. I no longer had to worry about running out of fire spells and saying, okay, before the next battle, you need to remember to go buy some more fire spells. And then you start the next battle and you realize, oh my goodness, I forgot, and now this person can't attack. Instead, I just needed to be sure that I could successfully cast an attack and survive the next round, knowing that my move was a bit of a gamble. By the end of the game though, this becomes a little less of a concern, as like half of your characters also have healing spells, and so you just constantly have them heal each other. Archers are another type of unit that work differently in this game. In older Fire Emblem titles, archers could only shoot from 2 spots away, which left them vulnerable if an enemy ran right up next to them to attack. In this game, not only can archers attack or defend themselves when they're standing right next to an enemy unit, but they can also sometimes shoot from 4 squares away, depending on how developed their skills are. This made archers some of my favorite units in the game, as they were always helping me get out of some tough situations. I also really appreciated that unless you were in a dungeon, you could have all your units from your prospective army in a battle. It allowed me to get some weaker units experience and have time to grow them into their full potential, instead of me just hiding them away in a menu because I was too afraid of bringing them out and having them get killed in one hit on the first round of battle. Battles are also typically a lot shorter in nature in this game, which I think made the pacing more fun and addicting. I can't tell you how many times I thought, okay, just one more battle, and then I proceeded to play like 10 more battles. Though the trade-off with this is sometimes I think I missed the more complex and longer battles that made me feel like a real tactical genius after I spent an hour maneuvering everyone correctly and getting them out of a tough situation alive. Fatigue was also not as big of a deal as I originally thought it might be. It really only came into play in the dungeons, as fatigue stats carried over from one battle to the next. Or, if you're like me, most of the dungeons are really short, and so you just run out the exit and then run right back in, and you're okie dokie again and ready to go. The last big gameplay innovation I wanted to talk about was Millis Turnwheel, which allows you to undo some moves if you realize you made a mistake. As the game goes on, you'll find some more gears that also give you additional uses of Millis Turnwheel. I actually didn't even use it for like the first 10 or 15 hours of the game, as it was just something I didn't think I needed. I mean, we've never had it in Fire Emblem before, so why do we need it now? But it ended up becoming like my new best friend. I have heard some people say that it's a great bridge between classic and casual mode. If you're a Fire Emblem purist and you refuse to turn permadeath off, but you get frustrated when one little mistake costs you an hour or more of your life as you have to restart from your last save, no worries, Millis Turnwheel has you covered. Though just remember, if your little mistake results in Alm or Celica dying, you will still get that game over screen and have to start the battle all over. Trust me, I did that at the very end of the final battle. Moral of the story, don't be like me. I always do dumb things in Fire Emblem. Despite all my praise, not everything in Shadows of Valentia is perfect. For starters, to stay true to Gaiden, most of the original maps in the game were remade for the 3DS. This is really cool in concept, but it also means a lot of the maps, especially earlier on, are just plain flat squares, and there isn't a whole lot going on. When the maps are more intricate, it often involves forcing your units to walk one by one down a corridor, while archers and spellcasters pick off weaker units. Most battle objectives in the games were also just rout the enemy, which means kill everyone, and that also sometimes got a little bit boring. I miss having different objectives like defending a spot for so many turns or taking out the enemy's commander to declare victory. Sometimes it felt a little awkward when I took out the main villain of a level, but then the battle kept going for a couple more turns because some low-level grunts were still alive. My final complaint about the game is that the hit rates are really not that great. I felt like I was constantly missing attacks, which sometimes threw a wrench in my strategy and left more up to luck. And in a strategic game, you don't want to leave much to luck. The only upside to this is that I also felt like I was way more likely to get a critical attack, and that allowed me to one-hit kill a lot of enemies that I wasn't expecting to pick off. It seems like, quite literally, you win some, you lose some. Despite my couple of complaints, Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia is an amazing game. It's a beautiful blend of old and new that holds up surprisingly well. If it weren't for the fact for the somewhat plain maps, I wouldn't have even known that this is technically an old game from 1992, as it doesn't play like one at all. It's felt fresh in its gameplay, it's addicting, it puts its character development back into the story and not just in support conversations, and it has great presentation. If you loved older Fire Emblem games and you haven't been able to enjoy the more recent installments as much, I'm sure you'll love this game. And if you're a newer fan and aren't sure if you'll like this game as much as popular inventions like the marriage system are absent, I still encourage you to give this game a chance too and experience a different side of Fire Emblem. There's still casual mode and Millis Turnwheel to help you out in terms of gameplay, and the characters are easy to care about and root for, and they still have plenty of interactions with each other. Also, like, back in my day, you just had to ship characters in your mind, and we all turned out fine. But for also anyone who's new to the series and wondering if this might be a good first game to play, I say go for it! Be aware that the gameplay is a little bit different than most of the others in the series, but the rest of Echoes still shares the heart of Fire Emblem, and it's great at showing off the best parts of the old and new installments in the series. It's a unique and delightful journey from beginning to end. Okay, but seriously, who approved the design for this guy? Like who on earth thought this hair, in particular, was a good idea? Nope, that's it. I'm out.